Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the ADC tier list for 9.21. So, as always, I'll have timestamps in the description. I'll also have a link to this Google Doc that you're going to see on the left here. Within the Google Doc, you'll have a little mini link for each one of the champions that I'm going to go over. If you click on that, it'll tell you recommended runes, recommended items, and then a rating system 1 to 5. 1 being the champion is one of the worst at that task for the ADC position, 5 being the champion is one of the best. So lane position, how likely can the champion get priority in the lane? Kill threat, how likely is the champion can get a kill or cause a kill in the lane? Safety is how safe is the champion, particularly from ganks early on in the game. Scaling is how well does the champion perform over time, and then reliability is how well is it how likely is it that someone can play the champion well over several games. So part of that is how difficult is the champion to play in terms of mechanics and decision making, but also part of it is how well does the champion fit into the meta in terms of complementing champions that might be on your team and countering champions that are on the enemy team. Okay, so be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So I do think that Ashe is going to be tier 1 right now. Now, let me preface this just by just reiterating, and I talked about this in the support tier list very quickly, just sort of what's going on with bot lane right now. Now, a lot of this is going to change a lot in the preseason, but some of this stuff has been going on all season, but right now it feels like it's even worse than it has been. I'm just going to be honest with you. I think ADC is the worst position right now overall in terms of game impact in most games. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one, games are just so fast. Like, most games are decided either like literally or figuratively at 15 minutes, either with a surrender vote or the enemy, one of the mid laners, either way, being like 6-0 by 15 minutes. So the game is just very fast. It's very snowbally, and that does not favor most AD carries because a lot of AD carries historically need multiple items to scale, and they're designed to be superior at 3 items to a lot of other champions because of how crit scales so well with multiple items. They have that extra layer of scaling with crit that most other champions just don't have, right? So spells don't have a crit equivalent. So there's an extra multiplier with most ADCs that just don't exist with other classes, and that's why historically they have done the most damage late game in organized 5v5 team fights when they get 3 or 4 items. But the problem is we're not getting to that stage right now because so many champions are way better than ADCs at 1 item and 2 item power spikes, and the game's just closed because the plates give a lot of extra gold. You've got things like Rift Herald to help snowball games even harder. Dragons are worth even more earlier on in the game. There are new resources like Scuttle that didn't exist in the past. And just a lot of the other champions and other roles have been optimized to be very strong on those item spikes, especially the mid laner and the top laner. And there's just a lot of mobility creep in the game. There haven't been a ton of new ADCs released, to my knowledge. Well, we got Xayah. Who else has been like a new ADC in recent years? Basically just Xayah, right? I mean, Xayah, I guess, has been fairly new, but that was like 2 or 3 years ago. So there are not that many new ADCs. There are not that many reworked ADCs, unless I'm forgetting something. So a lot of the ADCs still fall into kind of that old paradigm where they need to stand and fire. A lot of them do, and they need people to peel them, and that's just hard to come by this day and age. Now, a lot of the supports are these kind of like hard engage, heavy CC, peeler, or engage type of supports with the Leona, Nautilus, Pike, Thresh, stuff like that. A lot of your supports are going to have CC. But the ADCs themselves, they just don't have a lot of mobility. Most of them don't. And so they're going to be really vulnerable to stuff that's like very mobile, right? Like your Akali's, your Zeds, your Kiana's, just pretty much any assassin, Fizz. And those champions are going to be much stronger than you on single item. And they're just designed to beat you anyways. And there just aren't a lot of tanks in the meta as well. So, like, other than the support, which are like little mini tanks, they aren't really that durable. A lot of them aren't. Certainly not as durable as, like a Sejuani in the jungle or an Ornn top lane. Now, some of this is changing a little bit, and I think it will change in the preseason, but if neither team's really playing many tanks, then you don't need ADCs. Because ADCs, like, their primary job is to kill tanks, because Talon's not going to burst a 3-item Mundo. Kiana, most of the time. Kiana is not going to burst like a Sejuani or something like that. Once they get items, you have to have that heavy sustained damage, and that has traditionally been the role of ADC. But since no one's playing tanks, it's kind of a double whammy. You don't have as much peel for yourself, to protect you with most of the ADCs who are still going to be immobile, then also you don't really have a purpose why you're stronger than other champions on your team, because games are over too fast for you to get most of your items. And even if you had them, other champions are going to put up their damage faster, even if it's not as much sustained. And that's what you need versus squishies, which is what most people are playing. So anyways, the meta is not very favorable towards ADCs right now. So, you got to keep that in mind. So a lot of the champions that I've picked here to be kind of near the top are either very good on early power spikes, or they have other types of utility that either allow them to get ahead early or that allow them to catch back up in the game if they're behind. So yeah, let's go. And some of that, a lot of what I just said is going to feed into why I do not like the tier champions. I know it might seem like blasphemy not to have Xayah up here, but we'll talk about that here in just a little bit, or Ezreal. And a lot of people are kind of on board with Ezreal being weak right now, but for some reason, a lot of people still think that tier Xayah is good in solo queue, even though she has, one of the lowest win rates out there. And anyways, we'll go into her here in a second. But there's a big disconnect with a lot of people right now, I think, because a lot of people aren't thinking about those situations, and you'll see the highest pick rate champs are still going to be Xayah and Ezreal rushing tier, but they are also two of the lowest win rate champions right now. So there's a real misunderstanding of what the ADC role is right now and what should be happening and what's optimal. So anyways, let's go ahead and get in here with that backdrop out of the way. Okay, so Ashe. So Ashe is the highest win rate right now, and she does have a lot of utility. She's the highest win rate among mainstream ADCs by a very large margin. It's almost 2 full percentage points. It's 1.8%, which is a lot of distance between number 1 and number 2, especially with that high of a pick rate at 20%. So, what's going on with Ashe? Why is she so strong right now? Well, she has had a couple of buffs here, and we'll look at her specifically over here. So the most recent buffs looked pretty innocuous, but I was talking about how it actually did make her quite a bit stronger in that, where are those patches? Here we go. The Frost Shot, and this was on 9.19, ended up going up by the slow is an extra 20% early on, which is pretty big. Then the Enhanced Slow was up an extra 10%. So after you hit somebody, then you get an even bigger slow. And then the Ranger's Focus allows her to have that full basic attack reset, which doesn't seem like a lot. It's who cares? And to be honest, in a lot of lower elo brackets, people aren't even going to utilize that auto attack reset. But that's a full extra volley of damage. So if you think about it this way, when you normally attack, if you're hitting someone for 200, you have some pretty good AD, in the mid game, and you've got some crit, and you've got your Q active going on, then all of a sudden, that's a lot of extra damage, right? 200 extra damage that you could be dealing. So that gives her a lot of extra burst early on. And then on 9.12, which is still fairly recently, they lowered the cooldown on her volley by a second, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 20% more volleys you can be throwing out. And there have been some new builds and some new technologies that I think will help her out a lot, which we'll talk about here in a second. But Ashe is historically really good when AD carries are bad. If you look at most metas, that's usually how it breaks down. And what do I mean by that is that she has a lot of utility in her kit, and she's still useful even if you're really far behind. Because of she has several things that make her useful. Number one, the obvious one is her arrow, right? It's on a low cooldown. It can start fights. There aren't many champions out there that are popular that can start fights. Now, a lot of the supports can do this also, the Nautilus, the Leona, that type of stuff. But in other positions, you don't have that much engage. And so being able to have high quality engage from the ADC position and being able to follow up on things like Nautilus and Leona with your arrow is really good. So it gives her a lot of extra kill threat in lane, and it gives you some really good utility in team fights too, because even if you go 0-3 in the lane and you're down 20 CS, you can still throw an arrow and potentially turn a mid-game team fight around and still contribute to your team. So that's useful. The other thing is Hawk Shot, and people are learning how to use this even better, but you can just throw this. There's no range on it anymore, so you can literally throw it across the whole map. And if you position correctly, you can get vision of all of the enemy junglers' camps. So you can get the timings on those camps, and half the time you're going to spot where the jungler is. So that really does, and now they've added stuff in, I think over the last year or so, where it pings whenever it spots somebody. So when you throw it out, it pings it for your whole team. It makes it really nice, really simple. Um, and so that helps out a ton. And I don't think it does show brush, but it doesn't show invisible or camouflage champions. But nevertheless, I don't believe it does. But nevertheless, it's still going to be really useful scouting tool to help your jungler out. And then she just obviously has a lot of slows and poke. You know, she has really good range with this. It's a 1200 range on the volley. Does pretty good damage. It's 100% of your total AD, not bonus AD. So that's quite a bit of damage, in addition to a little bit of a bonus amount as well. So that's nice. And it's pretty cheap. It's 50 mana at all ranks. So that's really handy. And then, of course, she has like pretty good attack speed, and just the way that she scales with crit is a lot more reliable over time, especially if you don't get to 100% crit. It's pretty nice. So all these make her good. And then she has 600 range in the laning phase, so you can farm safely, and you can even harass the enemy out a little bit as well. But it's really just the fact that it's just really hard to get on her a lot of times if she's positioning correctly. You know, if you're trying to walk up and get that positioning to engage on her to poke her out, she can just hit you in the face with volley just over and over again. And it applies that critical slow. It's that 40% slow. So that's really good. So that's what she's all about. So she's not going to have the most damage in game typically compared to some of these other top tier ADCs, but she makes up for that with a lot of utility in her kit. Now, the runes, I think that a lot of people actually get Ashe wrong. There are a couple of ways that you can build her. And I think the most successful build is the Comet build. So if you look here, this website's going really slowly for some reason today, but a lot of people are still going the Blather and King. This is not good on Ashe in the current meta, and I think a lot of people misunderstand its interaction with Q. There's a lot of confusing stuff about Ashe. I do have an entire Ashe guide on the channel if you want like the super detailed version of it. But just really quickly, it does not, each arrow is calculated individually per arrow. Similarly, since Flurry is 5 instances of physical damage, on hit effects are not applied by the extra stacks. Okay, so the multi-hit effect is similar to Light Slinger and Double Strike, but the extra on-hit effects. So that means this Blather and King, whenever you press Q and auto attack, and you're getting your flurry shots out, it's still only applying Blade once. It does not apply Blather and King multiple times. And I think that's what a lot of people misunderstand, is it looks like it hits multiple times, so it looks like it would apply on hits. It does not. So it's only applying Blather and King one single time, which is not, it's not a good thing. Like, it's not a major amount of damage off a single item. Another thing is your entire kit is built around slows. Every auto attack, every ability that does damage to them is going to apply slows. So that means that the Blather and King active loses a lot of value because it's got that active slow, right? Whatever it is, 100, and steals their movement speed by 25% for 3 seconds. Now, that does still give you a bit of an increase in movement speed, so that's cool, I guess, but you're definitely losing value. And the other thing is, her W does a lot of damage, but it's based on your total AD. So having something that has low AD damage on it, like Blather and King only has 40 damage on it. If you rush Infinity Edge, that has 80 damage on it. I think Essence Reaver has 70 damage on it. So there are a lot of other things that are going to give you way, way better poke with your W. And the way that AD scales with Critical Strike in terms of your passive. And the fact that this is based on total AD as well. She has pretty good AD ratios. So you want as much AD as you can get on her a lot of the time. So that's a huge thing that I think that people misunderstand. Now, another thing is lifesteal is just not that valuable right now in most matchups. Sometimes it is, but if you think that most matchups, you're going to be playing against Nautilus, you're going to be playing against Leona. If we look here at the supports, look at the most popular supports pick rate. Thresh, Nautilus, Blitzcrank, Leona, Pike, Rakan. The top 7 picks here, none of those are poke champions. they're not going to be putting out significant poke on you in lane. It's not till you get all the way down to Nami, who's way less popular, like some of these enchanters, do you start getting into the poke lanes. So if you're against a very heavy poke lane, if you're against like a Xerath or a Nami or something like that, yeah, maybe Blade the Ruined King becomes a little more attractive. But most supports right now, the top 6 by popularity are not going to poke you. And the extra lifesteal, is not going to save you when that Leona engages on you. Like, you're going to die most of the time, right? And so you're not really getting a lot out of it. And lifesteal is really, like, most valuable a lot of times in the laning phase as well. And if you have a support that heals you for some reason, then, you're still not going to need it very much. And if you do want the extra lifesteal out of it, you can just go Bloodline. So I've got that here in my recommended runes, and that'll give you some free lifesteal in your runes if you feel like you got to have it if you're against poke, and you can still get a better rune setup. So I really don't like Blade the Ruined King. Now, when Blade comes online, when it's actually like potentially good and outpaces the other options, is when you get Hurricane as your second item, and you're consistently with all of your bolts hitting 3 different people. So that means the enemy team is actually grouped up, you're auto-attacking, and it's hitting all 3 of them. Yes, it's higher DPS. So that's why you see pros doing that all the time, because a lot of fights, or a lot of games are decided in challenger level and pro level by the team fights, right? People aren't running around, it's not a clown fiesta as much, as often as it is in like platinum, gold, silver, all that kind of stuff. But in those ELO brackets, in kind of platinum and lower, most games are decided by someone getting caught, right? And just by skirmishes and running around and just all of these 1v2s, 3v2s, all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot more rare that you're going to run into clean 5v5 fights where everybody's there, it's a clean engage, and you're going to actively be attacking, 3 different people at the same time with your Hurricane. So if you are going to have a lot of team fights, if you do think the enemy team is going to group up, yes, Blade the Ruined King, Hurricane's going to be better. But if that's not the case, if you think it's going to be a lot of 2v2s and skirmishes and things like that, then you're better off going with something like Essence Reaver early, or even Infinity Edge early, and that's going to give you much, much higher single target damage, and it's going to give you much higher burst upfront damage than something like Blade the Ruined King or Ruined's Hurricane will be. Now, when tanks start coming back a little bit, like they might in the preseason, then Blade gets better, right? Because then the 8% of their maximum health or whatever per hit is going to be more valuable. When they have like 3,000 or 4,000 health, yeah, that's doing a lot of damage. But when you're against these assassins that are going to have like 1,500 health, the extra 8% of current health attacks on them are not going to be as valuable as having something like an extra 25% crit. So this build right here is an old school build that you'll see pro players using, like I said, for organized 5v5 fights or in a meta that's dominated by tanks. And it's just not going to be as good. So, look at my, like I said, look at the guide, the Ashe guide, if you want the math on all these things. But you are way better off most of the time either going Infinity Edge or Essence Reaver. I think Essence Reaver in particular is really criminally undervalued on Ashe because it gives you the 20% CDR. That means you're going to have more arrows, you can make more plays, and it's going to allow you to spam your volley more often, which is going to let you poke. And it has crit on it, and it has heavy AD, and it even has some mana refill on it so that you can keep spamming your Ws over and over again and getting in some high-quality poke. So I think that that's a much, much better build. And then another thing that people had started doing for a while, and some people are going away from it, but I still think that it's a really good build, is Trinity Force as a second item. Now, it is expensive, and it seems kind of weird. Why would you go Trinity Force on Ashe? But for some reason, I looked this up when I was doing my research for the Ashe guide. Ashe's passive interacts with the Trinity Force on hit damage. Subsequent attacks against them to deal this much. So that means that this percentage extra damage applies to Trinity. So if your base AD is like 100, Trinity would make that a 300 Trinity proc. Then this, if you get 50% extra damage, if you have 50% crit with Ashe's Frost Shot passive, then that's going to take it up to a 450 damage on the Trinity proc, if that makes sense. So it's a really, very powerful, non-intuitive interaction with Trinity Force. I'd never really thought of that until I researched and figured that out. That means she does a lot of extra burst damage. you know, when you have Essence Reaver plus Trinity Force, and you W, you put the slow on them, and then you auto attack, and then you Q and reset your auto attack again. I mean, you're going to be bursting people out for quite a bit. A shocking amount of damage early on. And it just gives you some pretty good utility, you know. You get more... She can just use all of this. The attack speed, the 20% cooldown again. That'll put you at 40% total. Get some health, movement speed. And it gives you the extra kiting capabilities with the Phage. Now, that's good because, remember, the extra slows don't really matter because slows don't stack and you already apply slows on all of your auto attacks. But the ability to speed yourself up, now that's really good because that's going to allow you to kite even more, even better. So, I think it's really good. Now, is it expensive? Yes, it's expensive, but you can still get Sheen early on, which Sheen interacts the same way as Trinity. It's going to get buffed by your passive to do extra damage. So, you know, you can complete your Essence Reaver, then get Sheen, and then you're going to start spiking people out, and then after that, you can get the Phage to help you kite, and then Stinger's kind of whatever, but you can get that near the end. And I think that's going to be, like, the best 2-item power spike that you're going to get with her for picking off, you know, squishy targets in skirmisher-style gameplay that's not clean 5v5, where you're hitting every single bolt with Hurricane constantly. And with this build, I recommend Comet. You're already applying a slow to them off of the W. That means Comet is basically guaranteed to hit every time you throw it out. It adds a lot of extra poke to it. Remember that W does a surprising amount of damage. It's 100% of your AD plus this extra on hit here. So if you have, you know, 200 AD in the mid game, because remember it's total, not bonus. If you have 200 total attack damage in the mid game, and then you get this extra 80 here, that's a 280 damage every poke for 50 mana. That's on a 4-second cooldown. That also applies a slow. That means the Comet's going to hit him, like, for sure. And if you're going for that heavy AD build, then Comet becomes a lot more valuable. Because Comet doesn't really care if you have attack speed, right? All it cares about is your raw AD, and if you have any sort of, like, armor penetration, which you're not going to build that most of the time, probably. But it's really good poke. Even later on to the game, it scales with your AD, so it's still going to be pretty solid. And then you have Mana Flow Ban. That's going to help you out a lot in terms of, you know, just your mana management early on in the game. Allows you to keep spamming Scorch. Once again, your W counts as a spell, so it's going to apply Scorch and Comet. That's a lot of poke. And then you have Transcendence. Now, you could do something like Celerity for the little bit of extra movement speed. Probably not worth it, though. But Transcendence is nice because it gives you that extra 10% CDR until you finish Trinity. And it also converts later into like 400 gold worth of AD. So it's pretty good. It's like you're picking up an extra longsword and some change, I think. I don't remember the exact math on that. But it does convert over to AD at a pretty decent rate. I think it gives 20 AP. So whatever the equivalent of 20 AP is in terms of AD, I think that's around like 12 or something. I don't know the exact math, but a longsword's worth 350 gold, so it's pretty close to that. It's a little bit more, maybe like a longsword and a half. So it's good. It's good kind of in the mid game, and then kind of in the early late game it transitions and it's still solid. And then I recommend Presence of Mind Bloodline. Now, Presence of Mind is really handy because it's gonna, every time you get into a fight, it's gonna give you more opportunities to have more spells, throw more arrows, get more kills. And that's just something that I've really loved on a lot of champions out there that have like proactive, hard engage ultimates, like your Nautiluses, your Leonas, that type of stuff. And then Bloodline is really good too if you feel like you need the lifesteal. If you don't need the lifesteal, you can get the attack speed, the Alacrity, or you could even go Triumph and Alacrity if you don't like Presence of Mind, just for that extra little bit of gold and burst healing. So that could be handy. Now, another build that I have seen on her, though, or another rune setup, is you can go for boots early, and then you also get the thing that increases your movement speed towards slowed targets. So that allows you to run down people a lot faster. It's like plus 15% movement speed towards slowed targets from the inspiration tree. I forgot what it's called. But that's something that more and more people have been getting. My God, why is this running so slow? It's like it's Windows 95. See if he's got, yeah, this thing. Approach velocity, 15% towards movement impaired. So you can do that plus biscuits or plus boots if you want to. Now, a lot of these top ends, you know, people are going to be going lethal tempo. You know, if you do want to go for the Blatherin King plus Hurricane type of builds, then lethal tempo makes sense, and that's what you should get, and that does scale better later on into the game. However, like I just said, you got to remember a lot of these challengers and pro players are going to be playing more tightly organized plays where there's going to be more, there's going to be a lot more clean 5v5 team fights. You'll notice Essence Reaver is still the most picked item. Even though like this first couple of pages, you're not going to see it a lot. But even these pro players, even if you don't go for the Trinity build, even if you are going for the lethal tempo build, Essence Reaver is still the most popular, and I think the most powerful item. I just think Blade is trash, unless you're against a lot of tanks, or you're very, very confident that your team's actually going to fight a real 5v5 team fight. Is that going to happen? Ask yourself that honestly. So yeah, anyways, that's what I recommend. So I think Essence Reaver definitely first. It's up to you whether you want lethal or Comet. I think Comet gives you a lot more pressure early on, and if you're going for Trinity, I think it kind of doubles down on your burst, which is nice. And then Infinity Edge. Now, all of these are very expensive, so it's going to take you a while to build those for sure, but they're all also... I just think that they're faster item power spikes than some of these other things. They're not faster, but maybe stronger. Anyways, Ashe is good. People build her a lot of different ways. Even with her, what I think are probably suboptimal builds for most ELO brackets, with the Blather and King Rush, Lethal Tempo, she's still winning a hell of a lot of games, almost 55%. So definitely give her a whirl. She's really strong. All right, let's move on. So Jinx is the next one. I'll go through the next few a little bit faster, especially some of the more obvious, like how to build them, why they're good, and just slow down a little bit on some of the ones people, ask me about on stream a lot, or people might be most likely to challenge or question, my interpretation of it. So we'll talk a lot about Ashe. We'll talk some about Xayah here in a little bit. Well, let's talk Jinx. So Jinx is still going to be good. I mean, most people understand that Jinx is really good. Now, at first glance, it might say, wait a minute, TSP, I thought you just said this is an early game meta and you're not going to have time to come online with a lot of these high scaling ADCs. That's true. But the thing about Jinx is she has lots of ways to get back in the game, and she has decent utility, and she actually has okay burst early on. For someone who scales as hard as she is, she has like pretty decent harass and pretty decent burst because they've buffed up her Q so much over time. I mean, this does 160% of your total AD. That's not bonus. That's total AD. So with Zap, even just 1 point in Zap, early on in the game, this is probably going to be doing like 150 to 200 damage. And it only costs 50 mana if you have 1 point in it. In kind of the early game. So that can do quite a bit of poke. And then she has some nice like chain CC to follow up. So if you have the Leona or the Nautilus or the Thresh hook somebody and go in and you like use your chompers correctly, and they have good range. I mean, it's 900 range on these chompers. You can throw them out pretty far. Then you can chomp people and it CCs them for an extra second and a half. So really good CC follow-up. This is very good for sort of protecting you from engage too if you get it out fast enough. It does take a second to arm. But I'll tell you, as someone who plays Recon a lot, if I try to go in on a Jinx and she gets these chompers off, it's really, really annoying to get out because I have to walk all the way around if she has the chompers at the right angle in order to get my E back out. And sometimes I'm just dead by then. Sometimes I go in as Recon, and if the enemy has like Nautilus or something, I'm just going in for some harass, and as soon as I start walking up with my W, they chomp, and I go in, then I have to walk around, I can't get out immediately with my E, and then all of a sudden Nautilus sees me and I'm dead. So this is very good against a lot of the kind of hard engage champs there. And it's really good follow-up if you have the hard engage champs on your team. And it just so happens almost every game, every support is running the hard engage. So that's good. So you would think that, yeah, she's very vulnerable to that. She's very squishy because she's immobile. But the chomper buffs over time have actually helped her out some. So she's still not the best in the world against hard engage. But she certainly has a little bit more game than a lot of people think if you use the chompers correctly. And then, of course, her marquee thing with the switcheroo. I'm sure most people know how this works. But if you don't, fish bones... with Hurricane, like all of the Hurricane rockets turn into little mini fish bones and they all do AoE. So if there are 3 people clumped up and you have fish bones turned on with Hurricane, then it's going to hit each one of those people 9 times because each one of those 3 hits does AoE. So each hit is going to be 3 more hits. So 3, 3, 3, 9 hits. Now, those little rockets don't do the full damage. They just do like whatever 40% of the damage, but they can crit as well. And they also benefit from the 10% extra AD here. So that's why she scales so hard a lot of times in team fights, because she can stand very far back. The range is pretty extreme. You know, what is that? It's like 700 range. And she does AoE with her normal rockets and then AoE with the Hurricane. What? Where's what? It's on the couch, I think. So yeah, that's really her thing. And then if you do get a kill or an assist, then you run really fast. Obviously, you get a lot of extra attack speed. You can run people down. So she just kind of fits into that snowball hard meta if you catch people out. And just the fact that she can stay so far back and does such an extreme amount of AoE damage. I mean, the only thing that would even be close to this probably in terms of like AoE damage plus like range would be something maybe like Twitch. I still think Jinx probably does more on like 2 items than Twitch. Twitch does a lot too. We'll talk about Twitch here in a second. But it's a hell of a lot of damage. So she's still going to be extremely good. You know, she has good wave clear with her rockets. She can poke early if she wants to with either her Q, or she can just rocket them every now and then. Very good scaling off of 1 item and 2 items. You always want to go Infinity Edge first. And then I think 99% of the time you need to go Hurricane. I have had people say maybe Rapid Fire is better because you get like the really long range with fish bones. I think there's a limit to that though. It explains how Hurricane works here in the math. Fishbone damage, which stacks with each other. So yeah, if you're interested, just go to the League Wiki here and you can read about it if you want the exact math. I've talked about this more in past videos, but basically it means everybody blows up with Fishbones and Runen's Hurricane. So I don't know Rapid Fire off the top of my head, but I know it does give you extra damage, but I'm pretty sure there was also a limit on that, on how far it goes. I don't know if it says like how it works with Fishbones. You do get 100 plus 150 maximum range. Either way, I still think that you really have to go for Runen's Hurricane, even if you can get the double stack, like the 850 total range. I mean, that is good for your initial like one shot with that, but it's so powerful. With the Hurricane, it's so much wave clear, it's so much damage in team fights. I really think you have to do a Hurricane. You could do Rapid Fire after that if you want. I think that's what a lot of people will commonly do, is they'll do Hurricane and then Rapid Fire Cannon. Essence Reaver, not as strong on her as it is on some other champs. She does have some like pretty good AD scaling. I mean, obviously her Q has insane scaling on it. You just don't see Essence Reaver a lot on her. But most of the time, it's Infinity Edge, Hurricane, Rapid Fire, and the game's probably over by then. Or like a GA or something, some kind of safe item. So, anyways. And with her, you definitely want to go Lethal Tempo, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, and then Footwear and Biscuits are still the standard. I guess you could, there's like maybe a couple other runes you could get, but that's going to be pretty standard. So anyway, she has pretty good game, early game, not as strong as like a Draven or a Jhin or some of those other things, but she's still like pretty decent, like okay utility. You know, your Super Mega Death Rocket can get you back in the game with some easy kill snipes, or not easy, but very high potential for kill snipes. It's only on a 90-second cooldown early, so it's really handy. So yeah, I still think she's going to be strong. Okay. Draven's still really good. Now, typically, I mean, Draven could always be number 1. Let's be honest, if you're really good on Draven. Draven's so good right now, he's even seeing some pro play, which is crazy because he's so risky that a lot of people just don't play him. But people are playing Draven into the Kaisas, into the Xayahs, because he can bully them out and get ahead early. And, you know, the major stuff with Draven that I've talked about in the past is just the spinning axe, especially when you come into the lane, is 35 bonus on hit damage plus 65% of your total AD. So it's kind of like you walk in a lane with a free BF sword on every auto attack if you're catching your axes. So it's just really unfair. It's like he comes in with a free like 1,300 gold, and then it just scales up from there. People think that he really doesn't scale that well, but he actually scales quite well. He's just not very safe, and he doesn't have AoE damage. So in like a clean 5v5 team fight, yes, Jinx is going to outscale him. Twitch is going to outscale him. Xayah is going to outscale him. Anyone that does AoE damage is going to outscale him because he has no AoE damage. But if we're in a meta where everyone's just clowning around, running around, you get these 1v1, 2v2, 2v3, that kind of stuff going on, that's where he excels. So if it's single target, just blow him up, that's where he excels. And, you know, he doesn't have a lot of escapes, but if an assassin's running up to him, if an Akali's running up to him, and he has, like, 3 items, like, there's a very good chance he could just blow her up before she even gets to do anything. So if he, like, has rapid fire cannon and just, like, hits her with 1 axe coming up, knocks off half of her health, and then, like, when she tries to dash at him, he throws this little stand aside, knocks her out, auto attacks her again, she might die in 2 hits late game. So his thing is just, you know, his whole theme is fight fire with fire. So these assassins are going to come up and delete you in about 1 second. Well, he's going to delete you back in about 1 second, and he's got range, so he's going to hit you first. So yeah, once again, clean fights. Maybe not as much potential damage as others, and that's why people say he doesn't scale. But in the Clown Fiesta of 2019, especially late 2019, he's going to be one of the best, highest single target damage. And like I said, he's just very oppressive in lane. You know, no one's going to match his early game damage. And if you do get kills, then you snowball harder than anybody else because you get all this extra Draven gold. And he is the one champion who can comfortably like get early lifesteal without trolling. So unlike Ashe, he does have special interactions with lifesteal that are really good. So this bonus physical damage cannot crit. The base attack damage can crit, but the bonus off of the spinning axe does not crit. So critical strike is good on him, but it's not as good as it is on some of the other champions out there, if that makes sense. So you still want to build crit. Don't ever build something like Blade the Red King on Draven. But it does make lifesteal more appealing because this damage can lifesteal. On-hit physical effects do apply lifesteal. So this can lifesteal. And that's why it seems like whenever Draven gets his Bloodthirster, he's just healing for like, 20% of his health every auto attack because these spinning axes apply the full lifesteal to him. So that's why he will typically get Bloodthirster, because the lifesteal is insane. It allows him to trade, and he gets that extra shield early, so it makes it a lot harder to burst him out. And if you don't burst him immediately, he's probably going to win. So yeah, Snowball's really hard, super oppressive early game, has some interesting itemization with Bloodthirster, which gives him like some pretty good game against poke champions, and even against some assassin champions. And he can go double heavy AD items. So typically you'll go Bloodthirster, Infinity Edge, and then Rapid Fire Cannon, and do a massive amount of damage. Then, of course, he has like a nice movement speed and attack speed steroid. Stand Aside is surprisingly pretty good at movement speed things. You can knock all sorts of things out of the air. So Leona is about to come in on you with her E. You throw Stand Aside, knock her out mid-flight, knock Nautilus out mid-flight. When he's trying to come at you, like he's throwing his hook, you start the animation for this. Rakan, you can knock him out mid-flight. Zach's trying to jump on you. Jarvan's trying to creep on you. If you get pretty proficient with Stand Aside, you can stop all kinds of things. Someone's trying to take a Thresh Lantern, knock them out of the Lantern mid-air. That's not going to happen every day, but it's really sweet when it does happen. So that's good. And then Whirling Death is kind of, it's a long range, almost like a Jinx Rocket type of thing on a low cooldown that, can help finish people off pretty well. So you just want to go, I think Press the Attack is probably the best thing with him. Conquer takes too long to stack. Maybe after they rework it and back into Fervor of Battle, it'll be good. But yeah, PTA, it just gives you that extra little bit of burst on the third hit. People have been messing around with Klepto. I still think it's okay. It can give you extra gold, but it doesn't have the same kind of like burst damage that he usually gets. So I'd probably just go PTA these days, and then Triumph, Bloodline for even more lifesteal, Coup de Grace, and then Footwear and Biscuits. And then just Bloodthirster, Infinity Edge, Rapid Fire Cannon. So I still think he's very good, especially if you're proficient on him. He is hard to play. He's weird. You got to get used to catching those axes, but if you do, he can certainly be really strong. Okay. Xayah is another one that I'll mention. Now, if we're talking pro play, Xayah is probably the strongest, I think. But if we're talking, just kind of everyday play, she's just really hard to play properly a lot of times because it's all about the geometry with those feathers. You have to get those feathers on the ground, and you have to get the right angles to get those stuns and just get maximum damage off the feathers when they're coming back in. If you do play her correctly, she's extremely strong. She has great AoE damage, good wave clear with her her clean cuts, deadly plumage, adds a lot of extra attack speed, and some pretty good movement speed as well. So she basically gets 30% movement speed and up to 70% attack speed. And then the Blade Caller has a lot of burst damage and a lot of protection, and it's AoE. So that's handy, and it scales with critical strike. So it not only scales with raw AD, but also scales with crit, which is really handy. And then, of course, you have your Feather Storm, which gives you a lot of great protection against most hard engage out there, and it can double as extra damage whenever you rip those feathers back. So very good. They did really nerf this hard a couple of patches ago, but it doesn't seem to have affected her, at least at pro play, that much. So 160 seconds is a long wait on something like that, but the rest of her stuff still just makes her really good. And obviously she pairs super well with Rakan. She gives Rakan extra damage whenever she activates her W, and then she also allows Rakan to jump over to her from much further distances. So Rakan, I think, is the best support right now. If he's not the best, you know, someone's trolling if they don't have him in the top 5. I don't care what elo bracket it is. It could be Iron 4. He's so versatile. He has so much engage potential, so much playmaking potential. He scales well. Just watch the support tier list video, but very good in pro, but he's also going to be still very respectable in lower elo brackets as well. So I think she's really solid right now. She does start off with Essence Reaver, which I love. Most champions that can get Essence are awesome because they get the CDR to try to make plays. They get the crit, and they get the heavy AD. And they incidentally get a little bit of that mana regen too, which helps them pressure lanes better. So I think she's still going to be super strong right now. So I'll just go Lethal Tempo. Now you can go Presence of Mind. I think that could be a legit non-troll build on her. Because, you know, her ult is on such a long cooldown, and you get so much power with this, both offensive and defensive power. I think it's worth considering Presence of Mind. Now, a lot of people will get Triumph as well. It's up to you. You know, you can make the call there. Triumph is OP in a lot of circumstances, but having basically having a 20% cooldown most of the time on your Presence of Mind or on your ult is really nice as well too. So it's up to you. That's something a lot of people don't look at, but I think is definitely worth considering. And the fact that you can get a lot more mana back in the middle of a fight because you're not really going to be getting mana items. And you can run out of mana. It's unlikely in most fights because her mana costs are pretty low, but you're mostly getting it for the CDR on your ult. And then you can get the attack speed, or if you do need lifesteal, you can do Bloodline because you're not going to get a lifesteal item, so it's up to you. Then coup de grace, and then this footwear and biscuits, probably where you want to be. So yeah, I would just go Essence Reaver, Rapid Fire Cannon, or Phantom Dancer, depending on what you need, and then Infinity Edge after that. Okay, Twitch. Now, Twitch might seem a little weird to a lot of people. You don't see this champion very often, but I think it's just because people don't want to be a dirty rat. You know, it's just kind of like a role-playing type of thing. But he does have a really respectable win rate right now overall. You know, he's up near the top. He's just kind of forgotten about. Yeah, I mean, he's pretty far up there. And he just has a lot of mechanics that are unique for an AD carry that can help you get back in the game and really exploit a lot of weaknesses at like Platinum and lower. So number one, he's got his invisibility. Invisibility is always OP because people just don't respect it, right? You know, they'll just push up in the lane too far, and they'll see the support sitting there, and they'll think, okay, it's just the support, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Twitch comes up and deletes him, right? So if he gets ahead, it's extremely impressive because he can just walk around, and people are always going to be isolated, pushing lanes further than they should, walking over wards, trying to invade when they don't have backup. Just all sorts of clowning and tomfoolery going around in a lot of these games, and Twitch is the master at sneaking up and punishing people who are out of position. So that's really good. Another thing is it gives you the option, if you're really savvy about it, you can wait. So when a team fight breaks out, if you do get one of those rare 5v5s is breaking out, you can sit there invisible just outside of detection range, just wait on like the CC to land. So just wait on the Nautilus to use his ult, or the Leona, or whoever. Most of the time they'll do it. They'll just blow all their cooldowns on one of the first couple of people that shows up. Then after they do it, then you open up and kill him. So, you know, it's really nice that he's one. I think the only AD carry that can really just kind of be there, ready to go, but wait. He has the luxury of waiting on the enemy to use a couple of pieces of CC before he opens up and deletes everybody. So, invisibility, obviously really powerful. Also doubles for giving him attack speed, and it resets if you get a kill or an assist. So you sneak up and you murder somebody who's in a side lane, you can just go invisible and just peace out after that. So that's really handy. And then you have Contaminate. If people do try to fight you in an extended fight and you activate this Contaminate, you know, it does a ton of damage when someone's fully stacked on the poison. And that fits really well with Spray and Pray as well. So it's a low cooldown, gives you massive range. Don't forget, this gives you 850 range. You do not have to be in melee combat with someone when you open up invisible on them. So many Twitches just walk up into like hand-to-hand combat with the Irelia or the Aatrox or something and start ulting. It's like, dude, you do not have to do that. I know you're being greedy and you're trying to kill them even if they flash, but you can even just open up at like 700 range and that's probably still okay. You know, if they flash, it's fine. Right? You know, it's a 90-second cooldown versus their, 5-minute cooldown. You'll have an extra 3 minutes to go get them. So don't be greedy. Don't be that Twitch that opens up, in melee and try to greed out and kill them even if they flash when they could potentially turn around and CC and kill you. Be smart. Play from a distance. Just take the flash as a win if they have flash and get away. Now, one thing to understand about this as well is that it does reduce damage per target you attack, so do not fire through minions. If you fire through a minion wave on this, you're actually losing damage. So if you just popped level 6 and you roll up invisible and the ADC is sitting there in a minion wave, just normally attack them. Don't activate Spray and Pray, because when you turn on Spray and Pray early on for a single target, it's really not that much extra damage. It's not early on. Right? If you're already close enough to attack them, it's only 20 bonus AD. So even if you're attacking through one extra thing, right? Even if you're attacking through like one minion, it's still going to reduce your damage by 80%, your total damage. Or by 20%, you only do 80%. So if you're doing 100 damage, this takes you up to 120. You're losing 20% of that, of the 120, which is more than 20, right? So you're actually losing damage even if you fire through a single minion. So don't feel like you have to turn this on every time you fight, especially in the early game. Like, it's obviously way better later in the game when you're hitting multiple targets with it and when you really need that range to be safe in team fights. Like, that's when it's really good. And when you're getting like 40 extra AD, that's solid. When you have the Blazer and King, Hurricane, all that stuff, it's good. But like the early game, I see so many Twitches just turn on their ult and just fire through a whole minion wave, and it looks like they're healing the enemy team because they're doing so little damage. So just keep that in mind. Very, very few people actually do that correctly, use the ult correctly. Now, you do want Blazer and King on him, and the main reason is that each one of these shots off of Spray and Pray does apply on hit because it specifically says it right here. So Ashe does not apply on hit with Blade. Twitch does apply on hit with Blade, so Blade is very good on him, okay? So in a team fight, you can be applying these Blade hits to, the entire team. And once you get Hurricane plus Blade, you can potentially apply double stacks of Blade to the same person. So if you have 3 people lined up in a line, or just like clumped up really close together, you fire one shot with Spray and Pray. That one shot can go through all 3 of them, apply Blazer and King to all of them, and then those Hurricane bolts also come in, hit 2 more of those people, and apply, again, the Blazer and King. So once you get Blade plus Hurricane in team fights, that's why he just like feels like he completely deletes people. And that also, when you have Hurricane, applies your poison as well to everyone who's getting hit. So it just stacks up the poison really well, stacks up the Blazer and King really well, and this can also crit. Those shots can crit. So once you get Hurricane plus Infinity Edge plus Blazer and King, then you're kind of off to the races. So just really good, has resets, has the invisibility, long range, one of the heaviest AoE damage attackers in the game. It's great. Even early game, he doesn't have a lot of defense against things, but if you're getting ganked, you can go into ambush and just go invisible and just sneak away if you have to. So that can get him out of some tricky situations. And if they do fight extended fights with you early, if they sit in that poison or they just keep trading small attacks with you, like, he can do a shocking amount of damage. Like, people, you know, if they sit in the, if you start a fight with this Venom Cask on somebody, like, you just open up from invisibility with the Venom Cask, and then you start attacking, they have to run. If they sit there in that cask and they get fully stacked, you know, this is what you max first, but even like level 5 or so, right, it's, you know, your Contaminate max stacks is going to do 190 damage plus 210% of your bonus AD. So it's doing like in the 200s. And don't forget, it also does true damage as well. Once they get those max stacks at level 5, then you can do up to 12 extra true damage per second over 6 seconds. That's 72 extra true damage, which is the equivalent of like maybe 100 to 150 physical damage. So it's a lot of damage. It's a hell of a lot of damage early on. So I think that he's good. I think that people sleep on him a lot. Yes, he is vulnerable to things like Nautilus and Leona, potentially, so you need to be very careful picking him. But if they don't have one of those champs, if they have an Enchanter, he's great against things like Janna or Nami or Lulu or those type of things that just aren't going to be able to get on him that well. You know, he can be very strong. So I think Twitch is really underrated. Very strong champ. The last few that I'll just kind of go through here really quickly, because I don't want this to take too long, but I do want to try to get out an ADC tier list for this patch, is Miss Fortune, I think, is really underrated right now, just because, once again, it's an early game meta. You do want people who can do stuff early, and Miss Fortune's one of the best at that. You know, she can still get lethality. She's, I think, one of the only major ADCs that can comfortably get lethality. That and Ashe, of course. I mean, you have to get lethality on Ashe. It's amazing. Like, no, don't do that, okay? I'm just kind of trolling because there's a member on the channel, I think it's Gray Graves, who's always trying to tell me to, like, try lethality Ashe and how awesome it is and all this stuff. It's like, I guess. But anyways, Miss Fortune can get it for real. So if you're properly bouncing these Qs, they do a lot of damage. It's 100% of your total AD early on, in addition to this bonus physical damage, and it can critically strike. So if you kill the minion and it bounces, then it's a crit. So, like, I mean, I'm sure y'all have seen this before. She comes back with, like, a serrated Dirk or something, gets one of these bounces, this double up, when some weird physics happens and the minion dies and it bounces, and it literally deals, like, more than 50% of your health. And you're just like, what? If you're, like, a squishy champ in the bot lane. So, she does a ton of damage. It really doesn't cost much mana at all. It can also apply Love Tap. It's pretty decent, and you can zip around the map pretty quickly with your strut, which is really nice for rotations, really nice for back timings. So that's handy. And then the Make It Rain, this is one thing that people mess up a lot that I see. Like, whenever you're trying to set up for bullet time on somebody to kill him, use Make It Rain first. This applies a slow to him. It's a 40% slow. It has 1,000 range. So all you got to do is you just walk up, if they're kind of low or whatever, or you just want to start a fight, drop Make It Rain on them, and then bullet time. And then they're slowed, and they can't run out of it as easily. I see so many times where Miss Fortunes haven't used their Make It Rain, and they just try to bullet time the enemy when they're at 50% health. Like, maybe they get a really good chunk off of the Q, drop them down pretty low, and then they just, you know, hold down bullet time. The enemy just walks out of it. It's like, just drop Make It Rain first, and then bullet time. And then they have to flash, or they're dead. Or some kind of dash. Also, Make It Rain makes it a lot easier for your supports and other people to hit their skill shots. So if you have a Nautilus that you know is walking up trying to position to hit a hook or a Blitzcrank or something, just use Make It Rain on him. It'll just, once again, it's going to apply that 40% slow. And then that Nautilus and Blitz better hit that hook against a 40% slowed target. It's going to make it way easier for them to hit it. So just go ahead and do that. Just drop Make It Rain. The person hits the hook or whatever, and then you bullet time them. And boom, dead. So it's really good. Scales super well. So she can do, you know, sometimes some Miss Fortunes were messing around with like Blather and King and some other stuff a few months ago. I wouldn't even mess with that in this meta. I just want maximum damage right now. I would just get like Duskblade or Ghostblade Miss Fortune, get both of them. I think maybe even Dusk first. They'll give you an extra sweeper and extra damage if you pop in and out of the bush every now and then. You have a control ward in there. So I would just do that. So she does have really high team fight potential as well with her ult, but in the laning phase and even beyond, she just does so much burst. If you just auto attack, double up, you know, Make It Rain and bullet time. You know, the Leona goes in, does her chain CC thing. You don't even have to do any of the other stuff. Leona lands something. you just make it rain bullet time on them and they're dead unless they flash. So I just think that that's really handy. I think it's got a lot of potential. You can do Comet as well on her early if you want more damage. I have been seeing more kind of Klepto as well with her because the Q bounces off of minions do trigger on hits. They do trigger Klepto. So that can give you some extra stacks of gold, some extra potions early. Then you can get footwear because you have your own speed up, so you don't need the footwear as often early on. You don't need the boots early on. Then you can also go Biscuit's Cosmic Insight, so that's good. I mean, you could even go, instead of Cosmic Insight, you could get that, or you could get the thing that the Ashe uses as well, where you get that extra 15% movement speed when you're moving towards a slowed target. So you can cast Make It Rain and speed yourself up to go towards them. Now, like a lot of these other champions, I still think like Presence of Mind has a lot of potential here because your ult's really strong. You're going to get kills. You're going to get assists on it. So I think having something like Presence of Mind could be really good. But, you know, you could also just go for something a little more traditional if you want to. You know, like a Triumph Alacrity or something like that. But I think Presence of Mind could be strong. Now, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and change this up. I just think the meta is so fast right now. I would just go for Dustblade, Ghostblade, Edge of Night. I mean, honestly, like, it's totally possible you could even go Ionian Boots on her instead of Berserker. Just to make sure that you're going to have, like, the maximum CDR. If they do have tanks on their team, you know, Black Cleaver is still decent because your ult would shred the entire team with Cleaver. So Cleaver's still a decent choice. It's just a lot lower damage than the other stuff. But if they do have several tanks, you do have an anti-tank option with Cleaver. Because each wave of bullet time shreds, AoE shreds everybody. Especially now that people like Jarvan aren't taking Cleaver anymore. Darius is not taking Cleaver anymore. They're all getting Trinity for more damage. So, you know, just think about it a little bit. But if it makes sense for your team, if they have 2 or 3 tanks that are going to be a problem, then you could definitely consider getting Cleaver. So, Misfortune, I think, underrated, can still be really strong. And now, the last few minutes here, we'll talk about Xayah. So, I know there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with me. This is the most contentious champion out there. I think that tier Xayah is bad. Really bad. Most of the time. Now, I know everyone's going to say, but she's picked so much in pro, and they all go for the tier Ginsu's build, and it's so good. It's like, listen. It is good in Challenger, okay? When you get to those 2 items, when they're totally done, it is good. But, okay, let's start from the beginning here. I know I'm going to have to explain this. I've explained this a million different times in different videos, but I'll go ahead and explain it again. So, what's up with Manamune? And I meant to finish this up in an hour, but I know people are just going to... Everybody's going to want to know what's up with this, especially if you're new to the channel. You haven't heard me explain this before. So, Xayah, when we look at her abilities here, most of her abilities are really cheap. It's 55 mana at all ranks of Q. Void Seeker, pretty cheap. Supercharger, you're not spamming that, but it is really cheap as well. So, mana is not an issue with her. She does not need mana in the laning phase, okay? Like, you might run yourself out of mana if you literally spam a Cathian Rain on every single wave. Yes, maybe you can run out of mana. But in most reasonable situations, you don't need the mana off of tier. Okay? So that's number one. This is different than someone like Ezreal, okay? Ezreal, like, actually does kind of need the mana, you know, in the early game because his E is very expensive, and if he's spamming those Qs all the time for poke, he actually kind of does need the mana early. Champions like Ryze, you know, need the mana early. Cassiopeia needs the mana early. Kai'Sa's different because she really doesn't with how she fights, how she trades most of the time. So you don't get a lot of, like, inherent value off of that item early, and it doesn't have any, like, AD or anything on it, tier. So you're spending 850 mana for something that is basically a complete waste for the first 10 to 15 minutes of the game. So you're basically spotting the enemy, like, 2 to 3 kills worth of gold in power. Because you know, if you have something like Tear of the Goddess and they have a BF sword, they are going to massacre you in the early game. Most of the time. Even if they have no idea what they're doing, they're probably still going to beat you. Unless you dramatically outplay them. So why would anyone go this build? Well, there's 2 reasons. Number one, and this is the main reason, is that it can allow you to evolve your Q faster. Because it's only 2,400 gold, so it's cheap, versus the Storm Razor is your other option. That's 3,100 gold. So if you go man immune and then you get your pickaxe working towards your Ginsu, you get this stacked up a little bit, then you are going to be able to hit your threshold for the Q upgrade faster, potentially, than you would, up to 700 gold faster than you would going for the traditional Stormraiser, okay? So that's important. That matters, all right? So if it's like 700 gold faster, even with like decent CS, decent CSing and things like that, on paper, it looks like you would hit it like 7 to 10 minutes faster. But that's not actually what happens most of the time. So let me see if this is still the case. I didn't look at this before the video, but last time I looked this up when I was going for people, or going for this. So people typically complete this around 7 minutes. Now the win rate, look at this win rate. If you have just Tear of the Goddess, your win rate's 44%. If that's what you've completed. Okay, Man Immune's 48%. Now, as the game goes on, as you get more and more items, like something like Runins is going to be 57%, but that's because typically you get Runins like as a third item later on in the build. And if she gets to late game, she's going to be good. Same thing with Nashor's Tooth. Same thing with Zanya's. All of these are going to be like really high win rates because that means you're already like going into the late game. But this Man Immune you get at 11 minutes. Where is... Here. So you get Man Immune at 11 minutes, right? And that's with a little bit, you're going to have some stacks off of your tier, all that stuff. But it's only a 2-minute difference on average. 11 minutes versus 13 minutes. Like, if you're theory crafting this on paper, you're like, oh, God, it's 700 or 800 gold cheaper. So therefore, I'm going to have 5 or 6 minutes of additional power off of my Q, and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, that's what it sounds like, but in reality, it's only 2 minutes. Why is that? Because you're way weaker while you're building Man Immune. So that means you're going to get zoned off of waves. You're going to fall behind in CS. So yeah, you're going to evolve your Q maybe in some situations slightly faster, but you're going to be far, far weaker on single item power spike than you will with Stormraiser off of single item power spike, okay? And so that's really what it comes down to. It's like, yeah, your Q evolve is, on average 2 minutes faster. But in reality, it's way, way weaker early on in the game. It's just a lot riskier. So why do pros do it then? It's because they have way better wave management and because they're coordinated with their jungler to help pull them through that early game most of the time. So the way that you have to do this to make this work out correctly is you have to back and get a pickaxe immediately before they get a BF sword. That's really what this comes down to, is you need to back, you need to push. As soon as you're going to have 875 back, get your pickaxe immediately and run back to the lane, and do not let them get a BF sword, because BF's going to be 1,300 gold. So it's like you're asymmetrical here with what your opponent's trying to do. Most opponents with most builds are going to be trying to get a BF sword on their first back, versus you are trying to get a pickaxe on your first back and then stop them from getting a BF sword. So you need to get that pickaxe, and you need to run into that lane and just apply a tremendous amount of pressure over and over again, and just do not let them back. If they back, you're taxing them. You're going to be taking a wave off of them. You're going to be taking 2 plates, maybe threatening Dragon. You're going to make them pay hard if they want to go back and get that BF sword. Well, that sounds nice on paper, but the thing is, your team has to actually cooperate with that. Your support has to actually be aggressive with you and help you dominate the lane. You have to have a favorable matchup. You just can't do that if you're against like a Draven Leona and your support is, Janna or something early on. You're not going to be able to pressure to get the timing that you want. So you have to have a favorable lane where you're going to be able to dominate the lane. Kai'Sa's not that strong early game, so that's going to be rough. You're going to have like a Xayah that's really good on your team, or they're going to have Ezreal or something that's just terrible early game. So it's just really hard to manage that. And if their jungler comes down and camps you, which happens all the time in solo queue, once again, you're not going to get the back timing that you want. You're going to have to play very defensively. You're going to have to play back a lot. And this is why a lot of pro players will also take teleport on Kai'Sa so they can ensure they get this specific timing that I'm talking about. So that helps, but then you can never fight. In pro play, sometimes players will just have enough sense and say, okay, we're taking teleport on Kai'Sa bottom. We're never fighting. We're just going to farm, and that's it. And we're just going to rely on our mid and our top lane to kind of carry us through, and we're going to be a late game carry. That's what a lot of pro people do with Kai'Sa, right? Solo queue, it's not going to happen. You're going to have to fight. Your team's going to get involved in stupid stuff. Your jungler's going to come down and force a 3v3 with their jungler, or your support's just going to go in and have to fight 2v2, even though you have teleport. And so a lot of this, like on paper, in theory, in like highly coordinated games with pro players, makes sense. It is good. But in reality, you're going to be very, very weak if you go for this build in the first 15 to 20 minutes of the game. And most games are decided in the first 15 to 20 minutes of the game. That's why, she has such a low win rate right now overall. Despite how popular she is in pro and how OP she can look when she gets going late game, just the problem is you just don't get to late game most of the time. So win rate by game length, look at this. It just drops down into the gutter around 20 minutes. Now, yes, it does go back up and get a bit higher once you get to the 30 to 35 minute, but a lot of games just don't go like that. You see most games here, the game length distribution, most games are going to be over between 20 to 25, like at the very top. It's going to be 20 to 25. So that's the problem with her. Now, yes, once you get it completed and once you get your Gensus, it is very good. Okay, for sure, it's very good because the on-hit off of the Muramana, the on-hit can double proc off of Gensus, and so that does a ton of damage. Now, I don't think that you get your E-Evolve. If you go Stormrazor, I believe with Stormrazor you can get your Q-Evolve and your E-Evolve really quickly. So you can just get a pickaxe and get your Q-Evolve, and then get your Berserker Greaves and get your E-Evolve. If you go for the Manamune into Gensus, you're only going to get your Q-Evolve, I believe. And then you're not going to get your E-Evolve until you start building your Nashor's Tooth after that. So basically you might get your Q-Evolve 2 minutes faster, but you're going to delay your E-Evolve by probably like 5 or 10 minutes. You're going to have extreme windows of vulnerability early on. The Stormrazor is different because you get to get a BF sword to match their BF sword. It's a lot less pressure on you and your team to manage the wave properly. You get a BF sword, they get a BF sword, no problem. You got a handshake truce there. Okay, we're symmetrical. We're both working towards this roughly the same power spike, so we can both be competitive in the lane, throughout most of the time. Versus the Manamune is just really weird. Like I said, the timings are like very asymmetrical. You have to force very specific timings, and it's on you. You have to be the one that does something weird. If, you just go with the flow and you're doing the same thing they do, and you come back with a pickaxe and they have a BF sword, or God forbid you come back with a tier and they have a BF sword, it's going to be lights out in the lane most of the time, unless your support is way better than their support, or unless your jungler is just like hard camping you. It's going to be a problem. So that's my theory on tier Kai'Sa. I think that holds a lot of people back. Is this champion busted? Yeah, on paper, she's really good. She's really overloaded. That's why she's really powerful. Her isolation Q damage just does a ton. Void Seeker late game can do a lot of damage if you have some AP. Supercharger gives you a lot of extra attack speed, gives you the invisibility to dodge stuff. And then, of course, your Killer Instinct on a low cooldown, big shield, allows you to reposition and make plays. So, yes, late game, very, very strong champion. It's just a lot of games are dominated right now by the early game, and specifically because so many people go tier on her, then she's going to have a weak early game. If she goes Stormrazor first, then she has a bit more of a chance, I think, in the early game. If she's going Stormrazor, she could maybe sneak into tier 1 in solo queue. Once again, I'm talking about plat minus here. If you're challenger, if you're pro, you're going to be going for the tier version probably because you're going to have a handshake farm off, or the jungler's going to camp for you, or something like that's going on, okay? But in the Clown Fiesta that is 2019 and Platinum and lower, you got to be able to fight. You got to be able to rotate, contest those scuttles, contest the dragons, salvage the situation when your jungler ints your lane and try to at least get a kill out of it. There's just a lot of bad stuff going on most of the time, and you got to be ready for it. So that's what I would do. So, the Manamune, Gensus, like this is what a lot of people are going to be doing, but I still think Stormrazor is probably where you want to be, and then I would probably just go Hurricane after that. And then just, PTA, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, footwear biscuits. So that's what I'll recommend for solo queue. Anyways, that's it for this video. The last couple ones I'll just mention, like Sivir is good at scaling. She's very good also against a lot of these hard engaged, specifically Nautilus and some of these other hook champions. So if you have some meatballs on your team, you know, you got the Mundo on your team or some of these other tanks that are kind of coming back a little bit, you got the Garen, the Darius, something like that, then the Sivir can actually be pretty good. If you just want to farm off and try not to die to hard engage, which is a good strategy right now as ADC, Sivir's going to be good. Kind of like Ashe, Sivir's usually best in an AD meta where ADCs aren't that great. So she has taken some nerfs over time this season, but I still think that she's legit. Jhin, one of the kings of early game harassment if you want to run with him. He can blow people up. Specifically, his W in that root is really good when combined with a lot of other all-in champs. Especially some of these like poke champs like Lux, Vel'Koz, Xerath. Like these types of things with your W is going to be very strong. And then you can double down on that late game. Like the Xerath plus the Jhin shooting at people when they're like at half health is really scary. So there are some interesting combinations with Jhin out there. So he can definitely do all right. And then Lucian, more and more people are going for kind of the Essence Reaver build Lucian. I think it's just like Essence into Infinity Edge. Like I would not go Blade and King for the same reason I wouldn't do it on Ashe these days. It is particularly good on Lucian because each one of those double shots applies it. So you do get a lot of Blade and King procs. But nevertheless, I would still try out like an Essence Reaver type of build, like maybe Essence Reaver, Rapid Fire, Infinity Edge, or maybe just Essence Infinity Edge. So he can bully people out early. He's good if you have a high damage support, but some of the other early game champs are going to have a bit more utility, I think. But he is very mobile too, so he can dodge a lot of hooks, engages, and stuff. So I think he's pretty legit. I think he's probably underrated. I don't think he's tier 1 per se yet, but he could be higher up in tier 2 if you're really good with him. And then Caitlyn might raise a couple of eyebrows. I just think that most people do not play Caitlyn that well. She's really hard to play correctly. You have to have really good sort of combo work with the traps, the nets, all that kind of stuff. If you're really good on her, she can be great, but she does fall off later on. She's okay in the lane, you know, okay off of one item, but then once it starts getting to 2 or 3 items, she's just going to get outscaled. She just doesn't have a lot of AoE damage, kind of like Draven. So in like proper team fights, you know, things like Xayah, Twitch, Jinx, all of those are going to put out way more damage. She doesn't quite have the utility of someone like Ashe with the arrow. So she's okay. You know, if you totally dominate and start taking over all the towers and you've got like a very good siege comp, then she can be good, but I don't know. I think you're having to work really hard and like outplay them really hard to make her work. Finally got Ezreal here. You know, he's been nerfed over time. It's just it's an early game meta right now. If you're a god on Ezreal, then you can make him work. I would highly recommend going Trinity. One nice thing about Ezreal is if you do have a roaming support that's pretty good, you know, if you got a Pyke on your team or a Bard or something, then Ezreal can hold down the lane by himself while your support roams. So that's kind of handy. But as far as like raw power in the lane, you're just pretty much going to lose every lane. So that's okay. I don't even have Vayne on the list here, but like as tanks come back, maybe Vayne comes back in. But I was just thinking of like weak lane. But yeah, that's the thing. Trist has had a you know, her moment in the spotlight at the beginning of Worlds. People were playing her mid. It was really bad. It had a low percentage. People were rushing like Blather and King on her. I don't get it. I don't know why people were doing that. Like I said, it had a bad win rate. So I don't know. She's okay. She just takes a little while to get going. But if you do get ahead early, then with those jumps and the resets, you can snowball the game. So she is one of the highest snowball champions if you get going early. But the big problem with her is she's short range early and she can't control waves. You have to push with her. So that's really dangerous. Also, if they manage to push you in, you have a really hard time last hitting under tower because the explosive shot does a little bit of chip damage to all the minions around it. So it just makes it really hard to manipulate the wave to make it favorable for you. But she does take towers quickly. She does scale really well. She doesn't have any AoE, which is a thing, but she is relatively safe. So, anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Sorry, this one's a bit longer. I haven't done one in a while, though, so I wanted to give you the rundown. I definitely wanted to spend plenty of time on the Ashe and the Xayah because I think those are the ones where I disagree with what the popular builds are the most, and I think there's a lot of potential for changing up those builds and getting even higher win rates. Totally possible. I could be wrong on that, but I'm just throwing the ideas out there for you. I'm just letting you know what I think about the situation, and then you can make the call yourself, obviously. So I'm just trying to throw out some some alternative ways of thinking about it that maybe you hadn't heard before. So hopefully that gives you some ideas. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Check out the rest of the offerings on the channel. We do have a support tier list as well. I might be able to do a mid-tier list tomorrow. We'll see. But we will have more content coming out soon. And be sure to check out the stream as well. We've been streaming every night starting around 10 or 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I backed up the time a little bit so that I can stay a bit later until like 2 or 3 in the morning, because we've had a ton of people coming out between like 11:30 and 3, like really big numbers lately, like 400 or 500 people. I'm not really sure why we're getting that many people, but I'm really thankful for it. That's awesome. So I suspect, it's something about that time though, like midnight to 12:30. So I'm trying to stay up a little bit later so that I can, hang out with as many people as possible there. But come by, check it out. It's really friendly. It's really fun. I'll answer any questions that you have about League or Total War or just really anything that you want to ask. It's very conversational, very chill on stream, super friendly community. So yeah, come by, check it out. We'd love to have you. That's going to be it. Have a good day. See you next time.